Our next speaker of the night is John Carpay. John earned his BA in political science at Laval University and then studied law at University of Calgary. John served as the Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. In 2010, John founded the JCCF, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedom, which is a non-profit legal organization based in Calgary that specializes in Canadian constitutional law. Time and time again, John Carpay is always involved with fighting the universities because that's where everything basically happens. For us at SSFS, it's great to have John around and JCCF because when I first contacted John, they were actually the first people to get on board with the Freedom Summit. And ever since then, it took off. So it is my pleasure to introduce John Carpay.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you tonight. I am a lawyer, but not indoctrinated into the social justice warrior stuff. And deeply honored to be here with you tonight, and fantastic to see such a large audience here. We are in a state of war, but it's sometimes hard to recognize because our enemies are, for the most part, most of the time, they're nonviolent. This is not the kind of war from 75 years ago where it was very, very clear who the enemy was. The enemy, the National Socialists in Germany, Imperial Japan, and even after the Second World War, during the Cold War, it was very clear who our enemies were. The communist regimes in the Soviet Union and China, which ruthlessly suppressed all of the pillars and foundations of our free society. And I'm talking about freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, freedom of peaceful assembly, the right to own and enjoy the fruit of your own labors, otherwise known as private property rights, the rule of law, all of these things ruthlessly suppressed. But it was a foreign enemy, and the war that we're in right now is very different, and it's hard to fight because the enemy is within and is hammering away at the foundations of the free society. Give an example here in Ontario, the Law Society of Upper Canada refusing to allow Trinity Western University in British Columbia the right to have a law program, while admitting, and the Law Society is very public about this, and it's in the court documents, they admit very openly, freely, that there is nothing wrong academically with this law program. But the Law Society disagrees with the Trinity Western's Christian perspective on sexual morality. They can't stand the fact that there's a bunch of people there that have different religious views from the views of the Law Society. And the Law Society, their take on human sexuality is, you know, everything's fine as long as it's consensual, you go right ahead. Trinity Western says, well, no, there's a proper time and a place, and so sexual activity is only good within marriage covenant between a man and a woman. Both views are religious. You can't prove scientifically that one view is better than the other view. You know? Science is valuable, but science cannot take the place of philosophy. Science can tell you how to execute somebody, you know, what voltage of electricity or gallows or what methods, but science cannot tell you whether it's right or wrong to execute a convicted murderer. So you got these two views, the Law Society view and the Trinity Western views. They're both religious. The difference, though, between Trinity Western University and the Law Society is that Trinity Western University is tolerant and the Law Society is intolerant. Trinity Western University does not impose, does not coerce. Nobody is subjected to those rules unless they choose voluntarily to join that community, and that's what the Free Society is all about. The Law Society, in contrast, is a government body, and it's basically holding a gun to the university's head and saying, look, you're going to change your religious views and make them like ours, and if not, we're going to punish you. by not allowing you to have a law program that we admit is perfectly legitimate from an academic and professional standpoint. And so the benchers, that is the elected lawyers that are the elected leaders of the law societies, the benchers are a bunch of bigots. And we've been in court in 3 provinces fighting them. Another, and I should mention, this is now before the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court gets this wrong and does not rule in favor of freedom, it is only a matter of time before religious lawyers, be they Orthodox Jews or Catholics or evangelical Christians or Muslims, are effectively kicked out of the legal profession, because the logic is the same. The logic for refusing a law school to Trinity Western University because of its religious beliefs, the same logic would apply to say, well, you know, if you're a religious lawyer, if you've got these, you know, homophobic, hateful, bigoted type views, you're not allowed to be a lawyer. It's the same logic. Another pillar that's under vigorous and sustained assault every day is freedom of expression. And we saw this very recent example. Dr. Peterson was in Hamilton March 17th, and just a disgrace. The presentation was disrupted by people chanting and screaming and beating drums, clanging cowbells. What's even worse is 3 days later, the president of McMaster, Patrick Dean, issues a statement saying that the disruption of Dr. Peterson's presentation, you know, was not ideal. It wasn't perfect, but it was basically okay because it was nonviolent. This is where we're at. And yet I wonder if Patrick Dean was giving a speech at the annual Donors Appreciation Dinner for the donors to McMaster University, and what if a loud mob of people ringing cowbells and beating drums came and disrupted his presentation? Would he be okay with that? Because I'll tell you what, if he would call in campus security to put an end to that, then he is a hypocrite. Fortunately, we've got a lot of courageous and principled people who are fighting back. The Justice Centre has been suing student unions and universities across Canada. In most cases, actually, we settle. We write a demand letter. We explain the law. Our website has a list of all the favorable out-of-court settlements where universities and student unions have backed down. But when they don't back down, we take them to court. Right here in Toronto, we are suing. How many people here are from Ryerson University? I see quite a few hands. We're suing your student union, which is... Now, please don't let that stop you from electing better reps to the executive. But we are suing your student union over the Men's Issues Awareness Club, which is a student group that is trying to raise awareness about the fact that men suffer from higher rates of homelessness, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of workplace injury, poorer academic performance, so on and so forth. And the social justice warriors in charge of the student union, they won't allow this on campus because it makes some people feel unsafe. Oh. And when you hear that word, you kind of wonder, so was this Men's Issues Awareness Group, were they violent? Well, no. Were they threatening violence? No. But it's just hearing another idea that can make the fragile snowflakes feel unsafe. And it's, you know, it's tragic, because if you need a trigger warning before you get challenged by a new idea, because either you're too lazy or you're too stupid to learn how to think and to learn how to develop arguments, then you shouldn't be at university. We're suing the University of Toronto Mississauga Student Union. Same scenario, campus pro-life club, and some people say it's offensive. So therefore they're entitled to, you know, go through life and not see things and not hear things that they think is offensive. But it's always one direction. These people don't believe in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because if you were to suggest that maybe a social justice warrior should be silenced because what they're saying, I find very offensive, they would say, oh, no, of course not. Because, what they're saying is absolute truth, other than, the relativism that there is no truth, but don't go there. And so really it always boils down to, it's always the same thing, free speech for me, but not for thee. So lots of freedom of expression cases, lots of education work that needs to be done. A lot of Canadians will tell you, yes, I'm in favor of free speech as long as it's not offensive. Well, it doesn't work that way. That's like asking for dry water, cool sunshine, efficient government. It just doesn't work. Another pillar of the free society that is under sustained attack is freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. Totalitarian regimes hate freedom of conscience and religion because when you've got a religious organization or belief system, it is a competing authority. And people will not slavishly obey the regime when the regime is busy lying and stealing and killing. If you have a religious authority that says, no, that's wrong, and you have people who adhere to that, that's a very grave threat to any totalitarian regime. And so you see sustained aggressive attacks on freedom of religion across Canada. Currently, case in Alberta, local school board has ordered a Christian school to not read or study or teach any Bible verses that anybody might find offensive. Any religious text, whether it's the Torah, the Quran, the New Testament, any religious text is going to have at least some, maybe a lot of content that at least one person finds offensive. But if that's your standard of freedom of religion, that religious freedom is limited to teaching only things that nobody finds offensive, you have zero freedom of religion. So we're proud to be acting for this school and currently negotiating with the school board, and hopefully the right thing will happen without a need to go to court. So. Another pillar of the free society that's under sustained attack is parental rights. We're suing the Hamilton Children's Aid Society in a very, very sad case. Their two young girls were placed in a very loving foster home. A couple there, Derek and Frances Bars, had the two little girls taken away from them because they refused to proactively tell the young girls in their care that the Easter Bunny is real. And the social worker said this was unacceptable, and the foster parents said, look, we're going to do a chocolate Easter egg hunt, we'll buy them dresses at Easter, but we're not going to proactively tell the girls that the Easter Bunny is real because that's contrary to our religious faith, because we view that as lying to the kids. So we're not willing to do that, but we are willing to, otherwise facilitate Easter. Hamilton Children's Aid Society shut down the foster home and removed the girls who had been there only 2.5 months. There's your social justice warriors and their compassion. So we have to realize that we're in a state of war. And so the question is, how do we fight back? I'll mention 5 points. First, realize that we're in a state of war. It's a war of ideas. We are fighting against relativism and materialism, hedonism, postmodernism, neo-Marxism. And our success or failure in this war of ideas is going to determine what kind of a future that we have. So that's the first thing. Realize that the garden party, we're not in a garden party. It's a real war that's on. Second point, be willing to fight. And ask yourself, what kind of a society do you want to be living in 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 50 years from now? I, for one, will say it's better to die standing than to live on your knees. There's a very good handbook. I read this a few months ago. Social Justice Warriors Always Lie. Who's heard of this book? Okay, I see a few hands. The author is Vox Day, Voxday. Social Justice Warrior, SJWs Always Lie. You can get it on Amazon. It is a fantastic book on practical tips on how to take down the thought police and how to fight social justice warriors. So I'd encourage you to buy that and read it. So realize we're in a state of war. Be willing to fight. Third point, be willing to suffer. There are people in the world today who suffer arrest and jail and torture and even death just for standing up for their own beliefs or for trying to practice their beliefs or their faith. What we're called to do is not nearly as hard, okay? We need to think about the big picture here. All that we're being asked to do, when I ask for a willingness to suffer, it's simply do not be intimidated by all the name-calling. It's pretty simple. Because if you're going to be intimidated by somebody that calls you racist, sexist, hateful, homophobic bigot, and if that's going to cause you to shut up, then you're going to be completely useless in this war for freedom. So be willing to suffer the name-calling and do not be intimidated by that. So the fourth point, be willing to sacrifice. We all have resources of time, effort, energy, money. We all have those resources. And so use those resources in the struggle for freedom. I know many of you here tonight are students. You're not loaded. I was not loaded when I was a student. But I mean, there's no reason why you can't start the giving habit, even now, even before you're onto your successful career and earning lots of money. There's no reason why somebody can't donate $5 a month to organizations that are fighting the fight. There's an article on C2C Journal back early 2016, and it's funding the ideals on which Western civilization depends. It's an article I wrote doing an analysis of how much do the pro-freedom and free market groups in Canada, like say the Justice Centre or the Fraser Institute or the Atlantic Institute for Market Studies, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, all these groups together, how much money do they get per year? And it's less than 20 million. Now 20 million might sound like a lot, but when you consider just the budget of the CBC alone, which is a big propaganda machine for the other side, it's peanuts. And so we all need to be generous in supporting the organizations that are fighting these battles. Fifth and final point in how to fight back, remember that we're in this for the long haul. It took us 6 years to defeat the National Socialists in Germany, and it took us another 45 years after that thanks to Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Pope John Paul II. It took another 45 years after that to defeat communism in the Soviet Union. So William Wilberforce, another example. William Wilberforce was a Christian member of Parliament who he and others fought very hard. They fought for 50 years. They fought to abolish first the slave trade and then the institution of slavery itself. 25 years of activism and speeches and pamphlets and publications and lobbying, blood, sweat and tears, lots of hard work. 25 years of activism to persuade Parliament to abolish the slave trade, which the British Parliament did in 1807. After that, another 25 years more of non-stop activism to get the empire to abolish slavery itself. 50 years. So we're not going to be defeating the social justice warriors in the next few days or weeks or months or even years. Be prepared to fight hard in the long haul, and remember that in the end, goodness triumphs over evil, justice wins out over injustice, freedom triumphs over tyranny, and ultimately truth triumphs over lies. So persevere, be ready to fight in the long haul, and remember that quitters never win, and winners never